Just over a week ago, Depeche Mode toured Australia for the first time in their 10-year career. It was a brief tour. Sydney and Melbourne were the only planned shows, but the tour was made even shorter when David Garn lost his voice. So unfortunately they had to blow out their Melbourne show. Depeche Mode are one of the most important bands of the last decade. They've consistently produced interesting electro-pop music. In fact, 19 of their last 20 singles have been hits in Britain and elsewhere around the world. Their influence on the dance music movement, too, is undeniable. Depeche Mode have achieved all their success whilst also retaining their independence. They have no manager, and their record contract with Mute is based solely on trust rather than signatures. Martin Gore is the band's songwriter. He took over that responsibility after Vince Clarke left the band in the early 80s. He was in fine voice the day he came into Triple J, and we're going to hear that conversation as soon as we hear the sounds of Depeche Mode live. The experience, unfortunately, that few Australians had the opportunity to behold the weekend before last. So let's get into it. This is Depeche Mode and Blasphemous Rumours.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome into the studios of Triple J tonight Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, Martin. How are you doing?
Good.
You must be a very tired boy. You've been working very hard of late.
Yeah, we finished a tour in America. It was basically about 12 weeks long. That was including like the rehearsals and stuff. But after that, I've had 2 weeks off, so I managed to get a bit of rest. I went to Tahiti, so I'm pretty well rested. I'm ready for this.
When you tour, do you make sure that you make the work parts of it and the recreation parts of it interrelate, so that you're not just working for 3 months straight in a row?
Yeah, we go out after each show. We sort of link them that way.
You link them that way. Well, you're on the World Violation Tour. I mean, how's it gone? Have you been happy with the progress?
Yeah, it's been easily the most successful tour we've ever done. And we've not even started in Europe yet, and the whole thing's really promising. We've made it to Australia for the first time.
It's taken long enough.
We've tried in the past, but it's always sort of fallen through at the last moment. So, I mean, it's promising enough in itself that we made it here,
So how long are you looking at touring around Europe for now?
The whole thing finishes, I think it's late November, early December.
And how did America go? I mean, you play anything between, from what I can gather, 10,000-seat venues right up until I think your biggest was about 75,000 seats. I mean, what is it like touring America?
For us, really, it's the most interesting part of the tour, because there's always a new place that you go to, and there's just new things to see. It's such a big country, and Australia's quite interesting for us because it's the first time and stuff. But Europe, without wishing to sound blasé and stuff, is a bit boring for us, because we've been doing the same sort of thing there now for the last nine years, basically. And you see the same venues, the same people, same hotels, and it just there's no challenge.
So with America, you're always going to new places, you're finding?
Yeah, it's just like the whole thing is just a bit more, you manage to find a bit more enthusiasm for the whole thing.
A fairly mundane question, but what are your perceptions of Australia after being here for a short time?
Reminds me of England.
In what way?
It's, well, apart from the names of the streets and the areas, which are very, very much like London, maybe it's just that I didn't spend enough time here or whatever, I haven't spent enough time here, but it reminds me of a seaside resort in England. Something like Bournemouth. I'm sure I've been going to the wrong areas.
I think you've had the wrong impression because it's so cold here at the moment. Maybe that's it. Or for you, it's probably very warm.
For us, yeah, it has not been too bad.
Yeah. You're based, obviously, still in London. Are you happy being based there? How many months of a year would you be there, though?
Depends what we're doing. If we're not touring, then we tend to spend quite a lot of time there. But this tour's 6 months long, so I haven't been back there since the beginning of this, which is 3 months now, so I probably won't get back there for another month. And then we're off again. I'm back for 2 weeks, then we're off again. But on a regular year, I'll probably spend, 6 to 8 months there.
Okay, then. Well, look, we're going to run through some tracks ranging right through Depeche Mode's career tonight. I've sort of let you select some of the tracks. I mean, some are favourites, but most of them are what you think are the important ones throughout your career. So why don't we kick it off with going back to 1981, the very first single for you, a good place to start, a song called Dreaming of Me, and we'll come back and chat some more, okay?
Okay.
The first single for Depeche Mode, it was called Dreaming of Me, released in 1981. And in the studios here of Triple J tonight, I have Martin Gore. Now, Martin, Dreaming of Me was the first composition written by Vince Clarke for the band that you recorded. The circumstances behind Vince leaving the band, everyone says in the press that he was just sick of touring. Was it different musical differences as well that drove you apart?
I think it was really a number of reasons. I think the main reason was he just felt that he could do it on his own. He didn't need three other people in a band. You know, I just think that he'd had enough. He needed a bit more control. He was sick of making decisions, democratic decisions. You know, four people, each one having a say. He'd rather have more control.
And how did you feel once he left the band? Because you had written, or you were starting to write more material, and then the onus fell on you to contribute more to the band.
Well, I'd always written songs, really. I started writing songs when I was about 13 or so, you know, so it wasn't a new thing to me. But I was sort of thrown in at the deep end. I didn't have really an album's worth of material ready for when we needed to record, so it was a question of sort of writing some in the studio and recording some songs that I'd written as far back as when I was 17, say. Like See You I wrote when I was about 17, I think.
When you said you started writing songs when you were 13, what was that, on an acoustic guitar or piano or what?
No, it was on an acoustic guitar. I had a friend who taught me two chords, you know.
How many songs did you compose with two chords?
I can't remember. Hundreds, probably.
What sort of stuff were you listening to when you were 13?
I don't know. Well, my main inspiration, I suppose, was Gary Glitter. I used to really love Gary Glitter. I used to join record clubs just to get all the obscure releases and stuff.
Gary Glitter was huge. It would have been around that time. What was that, early 70s or so, that he was huge in England?
I liked him until it got embarrassing even. I remember when I was about sort of 15, 16, sneaking into record shops, making sure I didn't know anybody around, to buy his records.
When did you first form your first band?
I suppose when I was about 13 or 14, I think the person who taught me those two chords,
you got together?
We just started playing together, and we got a couple of people in playing. We didn't even have a drum kit, we had knitting needles and stuff,
What were they called? What were you called?
Oh, a terrible name, I won't go into that.
Okay, let's pass on that. Well, listen, tell me about, we just heard Dreaming of Me. When you listen back to the real early stuff for Depeche Mode, what do you think?
I think it must really confuse people. For me it's really interesting, but it sounds like a totally different band to me.
The elements are still there, though, for me, being a listener, but obviously for you view it differently, but the elements are still there. You can still, hear the band.
I think on some of the tracks, Dreaming of Me, I think you can see some kind of link, even Just Can't Get Enough, really. But if you listen to Summer Speak and Spell, it's so funny. Songs like What's Your Name? Things like that. It's so funny. I can sort of see more of a link with Erasure, which I suppose is obvious because of, Vince's writing.
Have you still kept in touch with Vince? Is the relationship still strong between you, or was it like a complete separation?
We went through a phase that lasted quite a few years where we didn't really come into contact with him that much. And I think that was mainly because, we were working hard, he was working hard, and our schedules really just didn't fit in together. And then we bumped into him at a TV, I don't know, this must have been about 4 years ago now, in France. And if I'd met somebody I hardly knew in France, I'd have been really friendly. But he met us, he'd been in our band, and he was so offish. We went through a phase of about a year or so where we really, wouldn't give him the time of day. But then we sort of started bumping into him at parties again and things like that, and things started getting better. And we're at a stage now where things are really friendly. Andy's been skiing with him twice in the last year and a half. They're planning another skiing trip now. We're generally quite friendly again.
Well, like Depeche Mode, Erasure is doing so well in the States of late. We'll talk a little bit more about your relationship with the American audiences, because that seems to be where you've been concentrating on for the last few years. But let's go into another track from Depeche Mode. This is after Vince left the band. This was basically thrown on you now to write a song, and this was the first single to be released after he left, a song called See You. Can you remember composing this one?
As I said, this was written when I was about 17. It's like one of the I think it's the first song that I actually wrote that was ever recorded. I wouldn't like to go back further than that one.
years is a long time, and the times change. But I think that you'll find people are basically the same.
See You from Depeche Mode, and in the studios here of Triple J we have Martin Gore from the band. Now, that must have been a great confidence boost for you to release that single, one that you had written, and it was a bigger hit than Just Can't Get Enough. Did it do a lot for your confidence as a writer?
I think it did, yeah, and I think it did a lot for the confidence of the band. In fact, I think we got overconfident. When the next single was released, Meaning of Love, I think we just expected it to do even better, and that was like the start of our down period. We had a down period that lasted about a year, that was through the Meaning of Love period, right through the Broken Frame thing, really. Which it didn't do badly, but I think just our expectations were too high because, as you say, I think we got a bit overconfident.
What? And you lost direction? You thought you should go in a different area?
It wasn't that. I just think that we just expected it after the success of See You. We just expected things to go, get better and better. What,
like anything that you put out would be successful?
Yeah, it's just a strange thing, If your single does really well, your first thing you release, especially after Vince leaving, you just expect it in a way. We were young, we were sort of 19 or whatever, and over optimistic.
Has it become easier with through the years to be able to predict when you write a song and release it, to be able to predict that it will be a hit? Has it, over the 10 years you've been together?
No, we still haven't got a clue. I mean, it's really difficult. We find it really difficult actually choosing the songs that we want as singles, because we've come to realise over the years that we're absolutely out of touch with what does well and what doesn't. We usually sort of sit down with Daniel, the boss from our record company, and we listen to what he has to say, take his advice really, and unless we really feel strongly about something, we'll sort of go along with it.
Are you able to is Depeche Mode able to take advice, or is it something that you prefer to keep within the four members, so that if you do something and you make a wrong move, then you can blame yourselves?
Yeah, we take advice, and we don't like being dictated to, but we do take a lot of advice. But at the end of the day, I think it's, the decisions are made by us. We still don't have a manager, so decisions still have to be made democratically.
Yeah, I find that amazing that you still don't have a manager.
Yeah, a lot of people do, especially in America. I mean, you go to America, it's the first thing you do before you play your first note on your guitar, you have to get a manager.
Yeah. Well, do you think it's been do you think it's been a hindrance?
I think it's, one of those things that's helped us and hindered us. By having the control that we have, we've managed to get to do things exactly the way we wanted to. But I think we've probably suffered in some markets because we haven't been pushed in maybe in the right directions. But I think ultimately, we'd rather have the control and lose out on a few sales.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, Daniel Miller from Mute Records, I mean, he must seem like almost a fifth member of the band, really. Is that the way you perceive it?
Well, for a period, I think he was, almost a fifth member of the band. That was when he was producing the records with us, and we'd spend probably 3 or 4 months a year in the studio with him, plus all the time we saw him in London or whatever. But now he's far too busy to actually work with us on the records, and he's such a busy person that we don't see him so much anymore. So his role is sort of really diminished these days.
I'm speaking with Martin Gore from Depeche Mode in the studios here of Triple J. Let's move along, Martin. Let's get to another song. This is taken from the 1982 album, A Broken Frame. You've picked Leave in Silence off this one as an important one in your career. Why do you think this one was so important?
I think this was the maybe the first track, really, that hinted at the direction we'd take after that. After the Broken Frame album. I think there was maybe another couple of tracks on that album that sort of showed the way forward for us. There was a lot of real sort of throwaway pop songs on, well, especially Speak and Spell, but there were quite a few as well on A Broken Frame. But there were 2 or 3 tracks which weren't so throwaway, and I think Leave in Silence was one of those, and I think it's the best example.
This time I think I mean it for sure.
Leave in Silence, taken from the 1982 album A Broken Frame by Depeche Mode. In the studios here of Triple J tonight, I have Martin Gore from the band. Martin, Depeche Mode have been together now 10 years. Can you sum up in terms of why you think you have succeeded? I mean, we've touched on various points, the fact that you haven't had a manager and you've been signed to Mute and Daniel Miller's label. I mean, why have you succeeded when so many other synthesizer-based groups have come and gone? I mean, they've almost been like fads, but Depeche Mode have been like an institution.
I find it really hard to know why we've sort of, stayed the course. But I really don't know. I look back on, sometimes I listen back to our old records and I think it's more by luck than anything. I think it's, at the end of the day, luck plays a really important role.
You really think so?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if I listen back now to things like, Meaning of Love, say, I think it was a miracle, it was a hit, and we managed to sustain our success and carry on after that. I mean, even See You, I picked See You tonight, but it's not exactly one of my favourite tracks. I chose it because I felt it was like an important track for our career. But, I suppose that one at least is a fairly good pop single, I suppose, good tune or whatever. But something like Meaning of Love, I don't know how we got away with that one.
Well, the band has also been extremely persistent. I mean, you seem to be really hard working. I mean, that must play a lot of part of it as well, not just luck.
Yeah, I think we're one of the few bands as well, really, that have placed a lot of importance on playing live as well. Although we've never made it here, the rest of the world, we've constantly toured. With every record we've released, we've gone out and we've done quite an extensive tour. And I think that really helps to build up a fan base. And when you do that, they don't sort of dwindle, so it's not so fickle. They're always there, ready for the next record.
A lot of the other bands who I mentioned, like who have fallen into the synth graveyard, I mean, they made that mistake, didn't they?
Yeah, I think a lot of those bands tended to believe the fallacy that electronic music can't work in a live format. That it's cold and it's static. I mean, it's just not true. We've proved that. Our audiences, I think, are some of the best that I've ever seen. Yeah,
but there still is that image with Depeche Mode. I mean, you were, I don't know, the atmosphere or the image surrounding the band is still something that's, separated from the audience. It's not exactly cold, but isolated.
I don't think so. The audiences are really, really responsive. If I ever go and see another band, I'm really disappointed by the audience reaction because we're just spoilt by our audiences.
Yeah, maybe I've lost out because, this is the first time you've been to Australia, so we haven't had that contact. All we've had is videos, the records, what we read.
Yeah, the other thing that we get accused of a lot is being depressing. And I think, the people who call our music depressing should come and see the atmosphere at the concerts because it's a real sort of, celebratory atmosphere. It's not, you don't see people there, like, crying and, like sitting there with grey faces. It's like a real celebratory atmosphere.
75,000 people in Southern California you played to. What was it like walking out on stage to that amount of people?
Well, we were obviously really, really nervous, but I think the main reason for our nerves was the fact that we were recording and filming the show, and we knew that we only had that one opportunity. It was a one-off event, so I think that made it really, really nerve-wracking. If we'd just been playing in front of 75,000 people, it would have obviously been quite scary. But when you know that every move you make and every sound you utter is going to be recorded. So that's really frightening.
And who did you get to film that event? Didn't you get the guy who did Woodstock? Was that right?
No, it was D.A. Pennebaker, who's really famous for the Monterey Pop.
Monterey Pop Festival.
And the Dylan Don't Look Back film.
That was 1967. Why did you decide to hunt out him?
We just felt that he'd pioneered the art of sort of rock documentaries. And to just choose like your run-of-the-mill, your contemporary video maker and get the same looking live film as everybody else was really a safe option, a really boring option. And we felt that Pennebaker could come in with a different perspective. He hadn't really been involved in the music scene for quite a while, and his ideas would be slightly different to your average video maker.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the image of Depeche Mode, but maybe we should go to another track at this stage. And we're going to jump a year from A Broken Frame. Let's go to the album of 1983, Construction Time again. And this is Everything Counts, and we'll come back and chat some more. Everything Counts, taken from Construction Time Again. 1983 was the year, and the band Depeche Mode. And from that band, I have Martin Gore in the studios here of Triple J. Now, it seemed with Construction Time Again, you really advanced into new rhythms and new sounds. Was it very much a turning point for you?
I think so. I think the main reason for that was the advent of the sampler. I mean, around this time, the first samplers were appearing on the market, and we always were trying to keep up with. Even now, we try to keep up with new technology. So we went out and we bought some of the early samplers, and we used them extensively on the album.
Has there been just one member of the band who has had that interest, or was it like all four of you are real aficionados in the technology side of it?
I think everybody's interested in it, really. I mean, maybe not Andy so much. He's not really a musician, to be honest. He's he's more. He looks after the business side of things really more. Although he plays live and stuff like that, he's not really what you would call a musician.
Has it ever become overwhelming for you, all the technology side of it? Because let's look in the last 6 years, the advances have been huge.
We've always tried not to get too involved in it. I think people often imagine that we're sort of more boffin-like than we are. We just try to find equipment, technology that can sort of further our needs, really, without becoming dependent on them. We still place the most importance on the song. I think that's where we're different to the majority of so-called dance bands and techno bands, electronic bands in general, because we still sort of write songs in a very conventional way. And if you strip away all the instrumentation, the song behind it all is still sort of very normal with a verse, chorus, middle eight, whatever, And I
still think that that's where a lot of bands, as you say, lose out these days, and they get caught in the trap that bands 10 years ago were getting caught in. Bands like, I think, Human League got very much caught up in that syndrome and never really got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the equipment that we use now is possibly, might be called, outdated. Like the sampler, the sequencer, the computer that we use for about the last 3 records is one that we just feel really comfortable with. And, it possibly doesn't do what some of the newer ones do. But for us, at the moment, it does what we want it to.
What about, we just heard the track from Construction Time again. What about the sort of the very industrial type rhythms that started coming into the band at that time? What was the influence behind that?
I think that was really because of the samplers. We basically, when we bought our first samplers, we just went out and started recording, sampling everything that we could possibly find. And a lot of those things, you look around even here, you got like metal microphone stands, metal legs on the chairs. We just sampled everything that was around us, and a lot of those sounds were really interesting. And we got accused of sort of jumping on the Einstürzende Neubauten bandwagon or whatever, especially because we happened to be recording in Berlin at the time, which I think, was just more coincidence than anything else. And, we were using those ideas in such a different way anyway that it was hardly, mimicking them. I don't think we ever sounded like Einstürzende Neubauten.
No, but that's interesting, because I also thought that it must have been some sort of German influence. Maybe you were listening to music at that time that was gave you the idea of doing it within what you were doing, but it wasn't?
Well, I mean, we were aware of Einstürzende Neubauten, and I like them. So, all your influences do come together. I think often it's more subconscious than anything else. But I think too much importance was placed on it because we were recording in Berlin, and at the time I was living in Berlin as well, which didn't really help.
Right. Let's talk about the influences on the band today. I mean, do you still feel influences coming in from maybe not so much current music, but rediscovering music from the past?
Yeah, I've got a really massive record library, I really like listening to stuff as sort of diverse as gospel music, doo-wop music. I really listen to a lot of old rock and roll music. And, sometimes you can see the influences. I think they're a bit more obvious. I think the most obvious of the recent tracks was Personal Jesus, where I really think that you can hear sort of a John Lee Hooker influence, like a blues influence with the foot stomps and the guitar riff. But then it's brought together with more of a Kraftwerk backing. You've got sort of a Kraftwerk influence there with the electronic, the beat to it.
Well, that's interesting, because I always thought Depeche Mode were like a gospel band, but played by Kraftwerk. I mean, the gospel influence. I mean, you come up with such wonderful melodies, and it's like a choir joining in. So that was very much the intention.
As I said, it's more subconscious than that. I don't sit down and analyse, think, what can I put together to make this song? I think, often I'll do something, and it's after I've finished a demo, I'll listen to it, it might be a week later, and I'll listen to it, for the 100th time, and I think, oh yeah, I can see where that came from.
Okay then, well look, as I said before, I wanted to talk a little bit about Image, but maybe we should go to another song. 1984, we're working up through the years. Some Great Reward, the album. What do you remember much about this period of time in recording this album?
Some Great Reward, I think that was when we possibly went through our most fragile time as a band. I remember we spent, I think it was like probably 3 or 4 months in the studio making that record, and towards the end of it, everybody was really sick and tired of doing it, and the tempers were really bad, and we also had pressure of making videos at the time as well. I remember we were making a video for Master and Servant, and Andy's probably my best friend in the world. I've known him since I was 11. This is how bad things got. We ended up in a fist fight at the video. And we only had about 4 or 5 days left in the studio. Then we were supposed to be going on holiday, and together. And luckily, we sort of managed to patch it up, and it wasn't too bad. But it was for about 2 or 3 days in the studio. We didn't say a word to each other.
Why? What was the source of friction?
He was claiming I was drinking too much at the video, because there were still shots to be done, and it was really boring. So I was drinking, and he was having a go at me for drinking. In the end, I just got too much. It's like I lashed out at him.
Were you suffering, I mean, in
It's
any...
not a good idea, he's twice my size.
That's what I thought. I mean, was there any other sort of pressures coming from outside to force you to sort of conflict like that? Because it seems like it was just a sort of an excuse for a fight.
Yeah, no, it was the pressure of making the record. As I said, it was the last few days of three or 4 months in the studio for that length of time. And, you know, you don't see that, you don't really come into contact with the rest of the world. So, as I said, apart from that, we had the pressures of finishing things like videos, and it just, in the end, you just explode.
Yeah, it built up. Well, look, you've picked Something to Do from the album. Why did you pick this one specifically from the album?
Well, as I said earlier, a lot of these tracks I feel are the most important ones for our career, and this one I just really like. It's just, I don't know why I like it. I can't really say why I like our songs. It's like trying to say why I write them. People often say to me, why did you write that song? And I don't know. I sit down and I write. And then at the end, you know, I listen to the end result and I go, yeah, I like that one.
But some surely must stick out when you're composing them and you just go, my God, where did I come up with that from? That's wonderful.
Not really. I'm really unsure about them until they're finished. Yeah, until even before they're released. I was really unsure about this album before it was released. You know, now it's actually been out and it's been really successful. Then I can look back and then I feel sort of quite confident, quite, you know, pleased about it. But before that, I feel really unsure.
All right then. Well, with that in mind, let's hear Something to Do, taken from Some Great Reward by Depeche Mode.
something to do? Is there something to do? Is there something to do? Is there something to do?
Something to Do by Depeche Mode, and in the studios here of Triple J, Martin Gore from the band. Now, touring the States, as you said, you've done a lot of it, and you've built up a really healthy relationship with the audience in the States, but surely in some parts of America, there's a lot of redneck territory that you've got to pass through, who a band like Depeche Mode would be fairly, I don't know, different for them compared to the pub rock guitar bands that they're used to. Do you find America like that, very much a land of contradictions?
I mean, we don't really get that too much. I mean, even though we spent 11, 12 weeks there, we still really went to the major cities. And I think people have a misconception of a lot of American cities. Like Texas, for instance, I find really advanced. You know, when we don't go to the outbacks of Texas, but in the past we played Houston, Dallas, Austin. And those places, I find they're ahead in some ways of the rest of the country. You know, that you can go to the really good clubs there. I prefer going out to clubs there than I do in England, say. They play really good music, you know, sort of a lot of industrial stuff, electronic stuff. There's like, you know, video screens. You might get 2,000 people in the clubs. And, you know, whenever you talk to somebody about Texas, everybody immediately assumes it's redneck. It's the same with places, places like Atlanta. You know, a lot of the southern places that we've been, I really think that they're quite advanced.
So you don't actively avoid going to some areas now?
No, I think the biggest trouble we had on the whole tour, funnily enough, was in Washington, which you'd expect to be, you know, one of the better cities.
Why? What trouble did you have there?
Well, we were just walking across a bridge, and I don't think people even knew who we were particularly. I think it was just our look more than anything attracted attention. And some sort of black bloke in a car just pulled down his window, started calling us dickheads. And he was the only person in the car. He was on his own, and there was like 6 of us. Then he got out of his car and opened his boot, opened the trunk of his car, you know, and you start thinking, why is he doing this? You know, there's 6 of us, and there was one of him, and he was really small, and he's getting out of his car and he's opening his boot. You know, you think you better just like move along quickly.
And what did he get out of the boot?
We didn't stay around to find out. We just moved off pretty quickly. Then he just got back in his car and sped off.
Jesus.
But I mean, that was Washington. That was probably the scariest thing that happened to us on the whole tour.
Yeah. Well, America really is for us, it seems very much a land of contradictions, and I'm interested in why bands place, I mean, it's interesting that bands have to place so much importance on breaking into the American market just because it's such a huge market, but then again, there's so many bad things about America. There's so many good things about it as well. I mean, does it confuse you sometimes that you're concentrating on a market that is so, well, sometimes hypocritical?
It took me a really long time to get used to the American market because I think the worst thing about it is it's corrupt, basically. I mean, the whole system's corrupt. Getting your records in the charts is all based on money. You know, you independent labels, I don't think, not for years and years, and they just can't do well in America. They just don't have the financial backing. You know, it's a strange market.
Yeah. How do you relax in America when you're touring around there? Do you go skiing or anything like that? Are you much into the lifestyle of America?
We don't really get the chance to do anything like that. You know, the maximum we'll get off in a town after a concert is 2 days, and you know, usually recovering the day after. We go out a lot, you know, after concerts. We go out, you know, go out to clubs or bars and stuff. So we tend to sleep the majority of the next day, or we move on to the next town. Usually, you know, the schedule is 3 days on, concerts, day off, maybe 2 days on, day off. It's that sort of schedule. You know, you don't get a lot of time off. Yeah.
I can sort of gather from, as this interview progresses, that, like, the stress of doing all these interviews and touring and stuff, it must sort of wear on a band and stuff like that. It does? Pretty much?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's pretty tiring?
Yeah, I don't know how many interviews we must have done on this tour.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we managed to cut it down for the American tour, because we did a 3-week promotional trip there just before the tour started, which you know, dealt with a lot of the major press. And then it was only like the odd ones that came, that, you know, sort of cropped up here and there that we agreed to do.
Sure. Well, look, at this point, let's let some music do the talking. Okay, let's get to 1986, Black Celebration, and let's hear a strong from it, Stripped. And in the studios here at Triple J, Martin Gore from Depeche Mode. Martin Gore from Depeche Mode in the studios here of Triple J, and we just heard Stripped, taken from Black Celebration, their album of 1986, and an album that many Depeche Mode fans hold very dear to their hearts.
Yeah, I think for me it's the first album that really sort of had continuity. Oh, no, well, Some Great Reward, there's a few good tracks, but Black Celebration was the one that really, I feel personally was like good from start to finish. Yeah.
The fanaticism of Depeche Mode fans is something that interests me. Does it worry you?
I suppose it does in a way, yeah. You know, in America now, you know, we're sort of faced with a situation which is a bit strange, where we've really built up over the years through the independent circuit and the college stations, and, you know, the alternative market, and now that we're starting to get top 40 play there, the fans really regret it. And there's a situation where, you know, they'll turn up outside the radio stations, or they'll send you letters, or we even one place we even had a girl ring in saying, you know, how can you go on this radio station? It's so tacky. You know, your fans don't deserve this.
Yeah, it places you in a really difficult position, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we can't keep going back to places and, like, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, the same size halls. I mean, you've got to have some kind of challenge. So, you know, you have to, like, do those stations. I mean, we won't do anything, absolutely anything, to further our career, but, you know, we don't mind going into a station and doing an interview, a quick interview. We don't feel that that's, like, you know, whoring ourselves too much. Yeah,
well, you didn't make it to Perth for this Australian tour, and a whole lot of Perth fans got together and sent in a petition to me to pass on to you. Do you encounter that sort of protest when you don't go to places from fans?
We do a bit, but not too much. I mean, in the rest of the world, we do manage to get around quite a bit. You know, Europe, I don't know how many shows we're doing there, but if people want to come to see us, they don't have to travel too far. And unfortunately, this is such a big country, and there's such wide spaces between the cities.
Yeah,
I mean, it's probably a long way to come, isn't it, from Perth to here?
It is a very long way. If you want to come and see a concert in Sydney from Perth, it's going to cost you quite a few $1,000s, which is terrible, given what it's like in the States to fly around. Well, look, let's wrap it up, Martin. Given that you have done so many interviews, let me throw a question at you. Let me throw two questions at you. What is the stupidest question? I mean, I imagine that you would have been asked a whole lot of stupid questions in the States. What is the stupidest question off the top of your head that you can remember being asked about Depeche Mode?
Well, one that we haven't had for years and years and years was, you know, how do you pronounce the name? And luckily, that stopped. But we actually had it at the press conference here the other day, and I don't blame the person for saying it, because it's the first time we've been here. But, you know, throughout the rest of the world, you imagine at the start of our career, for about the first 3 or 4 years, virtually every interview you did was, how do you pronounce the name exactly? Let's get it straight from the start. Like, every time somebody said that, we just used to look at each other, oh my God.
I don't believe that. I mean, I've always only said Depeche Mode. I mean, what variations on that can you have?
Depeche Mode.
Oh, Depeche Mode. As if you're a French new wave band. Ridiculous.
Depeche.
Depeche Mode? Please don't hold it against us just because that one stupid person in the press conference. Okay, and the last question. Is there any question that you haven't been asked that you would like someone to ask you?
Not particularly. I'm not the sort of person that really enjoys interviews particularly. I find it quite amazing that people don't try to delve into the songs more than they do. You know, I'm quite pleased that they don't. But, you know, if somebody really wanted to pursue something, I'm sure they could get me in a spot.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, I won't delve any further, and we're going to go out with a track from your latest album, Violator, one that has just gone through the roof everywhere around the world. And you've picked Halo. May I ask why?
I think it's just my favourite track on the album, and again, the only reason I can give for saying it's my favourite track is I like the atmosphere. I think it is like we worked on it quite a long time, and I think the end result really suits the song.
Like shackles on your feet.
From Violator, the latest album by Depeche Mode, and Halo. Prior to that, you've been listening to a conversation I had with Martin Gore from Depeche Mode when they were in the country 10 days ago.